Hi, my name is Sophie Mo and I'm an illustrator and tattoo artist, and today I'll be talking you through my tattoo technique. I specialize in illustrative black work, and it's very heavily consistent of dots and lines and more of a graphic solid bits of shading as opposed to the soft ones that you see on the realistic tattoos. A lot of the time when people design their tattoos, they might not necessarily think through how the technical aspect can affect the drawing and how different machines can do different things. And you do really have to have that in mind when you illustrate a piece. So for instance, I use rotaries and I use coils. Coils are really powerful and are good for punchy solid lines, and then rotary is really soft and nice and easy and is really good for soft shading like dots and little cross hatching. So when you design a tattoo, I'd say after you've chosen your subject that you're going to be illustrating, it's really important to kind of plan it through in your head and define the negative space, define what the density is going to be, and then kind of think through the different shading techniques that you're going to take in your project. It's really important to think through the contrast and the composition, and sometimes the placement on your body can really affect that. For instance, I'd say if you're designing something to go on your ribs, I wouldn't necessarily go to something so detailed as I would if you're doing an arm or leg piece. When illustrating a piece, I'd also really advise to consider what is the tone of the skin that you're working with. For instance, white skin have way more wiggle room in terms of contrast and what different techniques you can use and how fine in detail you can go, where with the darker skin, you'd really want to punch the contrast way more. There are specific materials that I definitely recommend using more than others. I would definitely suggest getting some fine liners and some brush pens, maybe some markers, and definitely a pencil. To achieve a clean line work, I would suggest doing a few exercises. Drawing geometric shapes without the ruler is a really good exercise of how to keep your hand steady. It's really important that you do get those lines as clean and steady as you can, because that's going to make a base for illustration on your tattoo that's going to drive the remainder of the drawing. It's also really important that you think through the different thicknesses of your lines, because that's also going to bring out the drawing and bring out some of the more distinctive features that you want to pop. For instance, if you're doing a portrait, I always tend to do the top of the eye line a bit thicker because I leave the eyeballs out, so that just really kind of makes up for the contrast. Same as if you're drawing hair in a portrait, really think through of how you're going to line it out, because the difference in the lines is also really what makes the texture be so nice and vibrant. Also, again, if you're drawing an animal, I would really concentrate on getting the outline really nice and steady. And then when you're filling it in, really think of what is it that makes the animal distinctive. For instance, if you're doing a tiger, you'd be concentrating on the pattern that goes through its body. If you're doing a bird, you really want to make some of those feathers more distinctive than others. And that's where the line thickness is really important. When you approach a portrait work, I try to keep the doff work in the face really minimal in order not to make it too dirty and make it stand out. Also, in terms of getting it tattooed, the more minimal the face is, the better it tends to age. And when it comes to more natural shapes, it's really important to have that separation of where it needs to be dotted and where it needs to be solid. And solid black shading in your design is personally, I think, what really makes it pop. So when you try and approach it in portrait work, I tend to maybe put them in the collar, maybe put some of them on top, because it really balances the contrast, it really makes the faces pop. And when it comes to animals and florals, it as well brings them up so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment box below, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you want to learn more about designing a tattoo, check out my course on Domestika.